Good afternoon, viewers and listeners to the British Business Podcast Series. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Peter Hill from Mark Holt Co.
Hello.
Welcome, and thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about what it is that you do and the business, and certainly some of the challenging things that are going on in business today. So if you don't mind, can we dive straight in and talk about your background and sort of how you got into business in the first place?
Sure. Okay. I left school and decided I didn't want to go to university. I had no desire to study anything particular. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I thought, I'll tell you what, I'll go into something accounting related. That would be a good background, a good starting point. So applied for a couple of accounting jobs, got one, and thought, it'll do me for a couple of years. I'll get some, basic qualifications under my belt, and then I'll see where I go from there. And never left. I just enjoyed it, found I was quite good at it. I was very lucky because the firm I joined at the time, the sole partner, the guy running the show, wasn't like most accountants. Now, I didn't know that when I joined him. I had no concept of what accountants were really like, but he was very salesy, very business-like, less number crunching. There is a typical complaint of accountants that they are effectively financial historians. They just tell you what's happened.
Okay.
They don't have any impact on what can you do about that. So,
I heard that
and I didn't know at the time, but he was very good at that kind of stuff. So stayed with him for 7 or 8 years, did a few exams, etc. And then decided I wanted to move on, found another guy, a chap called Mark Holt. So Mark Holt Co, Chartered Accountants, where I now am, one of the partners. Joined him. Similarly, he had great commercial skills, very business-like. And just found I loved it. I enjoyed doing it. And along the way, I was a certified accountant first, chartered accountant after that. So I had qualifications, evidence for clients. I know what I'm talking about. But actually, increasingly along that pathway, I do less and less accounts. More of my advice is business people coming and saying, I have this problem, what can I do? Now that problem might be, how do I make more money? My sales are falling, I'm not profitable enough, I'm financially distressed, and even divorce or all sorts of things that go with it. So more and more and more over that pathway, I've got drawn into a much wider range of consultancy advice. Part of that was we set up a business called Helium, Healium, Helium LLP. And we started to do work that people didn't think accountants did. So prior to that, we go, we can help you with driving your sales up, increasing your profitability. And the response will be your accountants. What do you know about sales and marketing? Again, we're not experts in that field, but we were better than most of our clients. So we started to do a lot of consultancy work, did more and more projects, a lot of them success-based. So we get paid if it works, we don't if it doesn't, which again, accountants did not do at that time. And that progressed. We did more and more, bigger and bigger projects. And then one day I was in Celtic Manor in Wales doing a seminar for Lloyds Bank with 200 or 300 people, I can't remember how many, on a wide range of pricing, sales and marketing, business structures, all sorts of good advice for businesses. And at the end, a lady said, you should write a book. And I went, yeah, okay. And she said, no, I help technical authors write books. That's what I do. Now, I thought naively at that point, you write a book and you hawk it around publishers and they go, it's rubbish, go away, or yes, we like it. And actually, certainly from a technical point of view, you produce a 20-page synopsis. This is what it's going to cover. This is who it's aimed at. This is the style of language you're going to use. This is the audience you think might buy the book. And a publisher then says, we like it, and they paid me to write it. So they paid me a very small amount of money to write the book, and I get a percentage of what it sells. So Pricing for Profit, my book on pricing, is actually a sort of encapsulation of 10 to 15 years of all those projects where we were helping businesses to make more money. That was what that book entailed. And then at the moment, I do more of the same. So I have a client bank of clients I look after in our accounting practice. I do audit work, accounts work, tax work, and I also do projects and work that springs off the back of my Pricing for Profit book. So that's my pathway from leaving school to what I do now.
How would somebody get in contact with you to be able to talk to you about that book? Or in fact business?
The book is available on Amazon. So if you want to buy it in English, in Portuguese in Brazil, in Vietnamese in Vietnam, German in Germany, it's available. My contact details, if you buy the book, are in there, but they can contact me through Mark Holt Co regardless. But yeah, the book's on Amazon. You can just buy it in Kindle format or paperback or whatever you want to buy it in. So.
Fantastic. And so obviously you give advice across a number of things. and you've worked with so many businesses, and we were talking earlier, and just the number blew my mind. Do they all need unique advice and support?
They all think they do. I get a lot of people going, oh yeah, but not in my business, and oh yeah, not in my industry, because they only know their business.
Of course.
That's their sphere of vision. That's all they see. Whereas most accountants, not just me, but most accountants are working with a wide range of care homes, manufacturing businesses, retail, tourism, hospitality, all sorts of businesses, and small ones, people turning over a few £100,000 to people turning over £100 million is probably our largest, whole range of clients. What you see when you deal with those is the issues are the same. They're just different scale issues. Okay. There might be a different focus where they all have the same issues, but that's the big issue in that client, that's the big issue in that client. So I would say 90% of the issues we come across are the same issues, repeated based on economic cycles. In the up times they want to save tax, in the down times they want to make more money. All those issues are repeated time and time again. And the weaknesses you see are very common. The flaws in businesses are very common. Everyone talks about imposter syndrome. See it all the time. People running successful businesses who think someone's going to catch them out one day because they're making up as they go along. And we say, we're all making it up as we go along. So very common issues. In fact, one of the exercises we run for businesses, we have we call it the rocket diagram, a little triangle. And it says, a business must have a vision. Business must have a strategy, a structure, a culture. Somebody should be driving products and services, sales and marketing, finance, people, systems, etc. So a very simplistic model of what a business needs to get right. And you go into a family business or a business with multiple people involved in it, and you go, right, who's in charge of products and services? And 2 hands go up. You go, we can't both be in charge of it. Well, I thought I was in charge of it. Or you get finance, no one's hands go up. Nobody wants to deal with that. So in quite large businesses, you do find this absence of clarity of who's in charge of what and what their job descriptions are. So I think the problems are the same. They're just different scales, different cycles of a business. But when they say, oh yeah, but not in my business, no, it's in every business. The issues are the same.
Is it then ultimately just going into a business and actually sometimes asking that basic question?
Yeah, when we go into businesses, we start very much with that diagram and go, who's in charge of what? Whose decisions are it? Now, in very small businesses, it might be one person's name in each of those areas.
Sure.
In larger businesses, family business particularly, you might get, I want to be in charge of that, and somebody else says, I want to be in charge of that, because there's emotional dynamics as well as business dynamics. But that clarity of who's in charge of it is important, but also no one's volunteered for vision. So what is your vision? Where are you taking this business? No one's in charge of products and services. So what are you going to be selling when the stuff you're selling today is no longer in fashion or in demand? That starting point is a great, very basic attention to what are the basics you need to get right. And one of the things we say about that diagram is if you are 6 out of 10 in all those areas, you have a phenomenal business. Because most businesses are 9 out of 10 in the things they're comfortable with and 3 out of 10 in the stuff they're not comfortable with.
Wow.
And where do they spend their time? On the stuff they're comfortable with, because they like doing it and they're good at doing it and they know how to do it. And what do they not touch? The stuff that needs fixing, because they don't know how to deal with it and they're not comfortable with it.
So the comfort zone mentality.
Absolutely. And you do see that across a lot of businesses, which is no one really wants to tackle that problem, so they don't tackle that problem. Wow. And that's common. Lots of businesses, all shapes and sizes.
So following on from the book, can we talk specifically about the issue of pricing?
Yep.
Because can you explain some of the sorts of issues that you come across?
I guess one of the first things to understand when we talk about pricing is it's a very emotive topic. Everyone thinks they understand it. You go into any business and go, oh yeah, but this is the way we do it around here. And they make very emotional decisions. So there's a very basic fundamental issue, which is if I'm cheaper, I'll sell more. You go, okay, I can subscribe to that. And if I'm more expensive, I'll sell less. Okay. But that's not the right question.
Right, okay.
The right question is, if you drop your prices in order to be able to sell more stuff, you're going to make less money. So how much more do you need to sell to recoup what you've just given away? And no one does the financial question.
Sure.
They just do the emotional one. Cheaper sells more expensive sells less. I'm going to do this. And as an accountant, I love numbers. That's my thing. But as a business owner, you go, it's not an emotional issue. It's a financial issue. You've got to crunch the numbers. And no one does. So that's the starting problem we have with a pricing issue is people are making judgments based on emotional reactions, not calculated, functional, financial decision making. Another one I often see, and I had it with a client of mine, electrical wholesaling business, 10 branches, pretty much left to their own devices. One branch sells their staple product, 2.5 twin and earth cable, at, let's say, £20 a roll. All the others are selling at £30 a roll. And you go, why are you doing that? And he said, it's a loss leader, brings footfall in. And I go, okay, I understand the emotional judgment. If I'm cheaper on that product, more customers will come in the front door. And your belief that they will buy more other products as a result. I understand the logic of that. Prove it. Show me. Well, what do you mean? Well, okay, you sell cable at this price. How many consumer units do you sell compared to the branch down the road that sells it at a higher price and the number of consumer units that they sell? And you crunch those numbers and you go, you're not selling any more of any other products than the guy down the road selling his core product more expensive than you are. So your logic of a loss leader is not working. What's actually happening is they come in, they buy your cable, and they go somewhere else to buy other stuff. So your footfall is up, your revenues are not. So again, that emotional decision of it's a loss leader, it works like this. It doesn't work like that. And it might work, but show me, prove it, crunch the numbers. So there's quite a lot of things where when you get into pricing, you find that people are making judgments without facts, without information.
And because of your background and experience, and you've seen this hundreds, if not thousands of times, you're able to say that and ask those questions.
Absolutely. I mean, again, one of the common things you get, particularly in a box shifting business. So if you buy stuff and sell stuff, slightly different dynamics, but the same principles in a business that sells time, like lawyers or accountants. But in a box shifting business, one of the very first exercises we do is customer classification. We just get their customers and rank them. And we go, okay, who are your top customers? Who are the A's? Who are the most important customers you do not wish to lose because they spend a lot of money and they're important potential referrers of business? And who are the middle ones where they're nice cash cows, steady buyers, they buy a lot of stuff, they come in when they need stuff. And then you've got ones at the bottom who don't spend very often or don't spend very much. And we do that analysis. Now, when I go into businesses, they don't know this stuff. They've never done that exercise. And then what you find is, and again, this is a real example, and it's certainly typical of many businesses. The last business I went into, 5% of their customers by number was 2/3 of their turnover. And that's not a massive surprise. They're big spenders. And I said, when was the last time you spoke to these people? Oh, yeah, I don't know. I haven't spoken to them. These are your top. You can't lose these customers. Wow. That's a big chunk of turnover. Next category, I think it was about 32%, something like that, just under a third, reflected about 45% of their turnover. So a big chunk of customers, big chunk of turnover. And the maths, what you get left with, if my maths serves me right, and it should do on an accountant, is 2% of your revenue comes from 50% of your customers. Now, I'm an accountant, but you don't need to be an accountant to go, that doesn't make money. Yeah, sure. That can't make money. No. And again, they haven't done the maths bit of the equation. They just go, all customers are important. No, they're not. Everyone's equal. No, they're not. Big customers are more important, not necessarily scale, but big spenders, good margins, repeat customers, loyal customers. Those first two categories are the ones you've got to spend your time on. Where does the time normally get sucked into? The miserable so-and-sos at the bottom end who moan about everything, complain about the price, don't buy very much, don't pay on time. And that's a huge chunk of time and energy expended on a tiny amount of turnover. And again, different dynamics in other businesses, but the principles are the same. Big customers, middle customers, small customers, do the numbers. And what you probably end up with is get rid of the small ones. Make your business leaner.
Make an active decision to let them go.
Sack them. Yeah. Actually, what we normally say is don't just write them a letter and saying, please go somewhere else. Push their prices up. And if they stay, they are promoted into the second category. They're now good customers because they're paying a decent price. Or set minimum order quantities so they can't place a £20 order. Or make them cash only customers so you haven't got a debt recovery problem. So change the proposition for those bottom customers. And if they don't like it, they vote to leave. You don't have to sack them. They'll vote with their feet if they don't like the new terms that you're offering to that category of customers. I mean, just by way of example, the minimum order quantity, in order to work that out, the first thing we do is we go, well, how much does it cost you to make a transaction occur? So in this electrical wholesaling business, somebody rings up, says, have you got one of these? Yes, we have. What's the price? That's the price. Can you send me a quote? Send that by email. Yes, I'd like to order that. Somebody picks it, packs it, ships it, invoice is raised and sent, statement is raised and sent, somebody chases money, you finance it for 60 days. It's at least £5 of anyone's money to undertake that transaction. If their margin, as it was 25%, any order below £20, you've lost money.
Yes.
They had 14,000 transactions below £20.
Wow.
Now, a lot of those were small transactions on big customers. Okay, leave them alone. That's okay.
Sure.
A lot of them were once a year customers, a couple of times a year customers. You're losing money servicing those customers. And then you get the emotional reaction, which is, oh yeah, but they might be a big customer next year. Okay, they haven't been for 5 years previously. They're not going to be in the next year. But again, that emotional decision making without facts makes flawed decisions.
And because you're not emotionally linked to the
Absolutely.
team, you're able to ask those really hard-hitting questions that they think are hard-hitting, and you're just saying, these aren't hard-hitting, these are just
absolutely
run-of-the-mill, day-to-day questions that you should be asking every day.
Yeah, and I think that is part of the value we bring to the equation is, and sometimes if we're running a project where we're rewarded based on success of the project, I have a financial imperative to kick their backside because I don't earn any money if they don't do the things they need to do. So we are detached in the sense of I have no emotional reaction to saying to a customer, he's rubbish, get rid of him. I also have an air of authority. I've done it many times before, and they go, oh yeah, but, and I go, okay, yeah, but what? Show me, prove, show me the numbers. Your logic makes sense, prove it works. And of course they can't because they're making emotional decisions.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I know that our listeners and viewers out there will be taking copious notes. I mean, you talk pretty quickly because there's so much.
I'm enthusiastic about it.
There's so much there's so much knowledge and content in what you're saying. If I was on the other end of the camera, I'd be making these notes so that I could come back to this. And that's what this is all about.
I mean, one of the other things, and again, it's more of a sales issue, and we're not sales trainers. We are, I think, in many ways, better salespeople than some of our clients. They have order takers. That's not a salesperson.
Sure.
So we would go into businesses, and as well as crunching the numbers on pricing and stuff like that, we look at their sales process. They might have 10 sales guy. One's brilliant, one's rubbish. What's he doing that he's not doing? There's an analysis of behaviors and techniques. What does he actually say? What script does he follow? He may not think it's a script, but he says the same things time and time again. This guy says different things. It doesn't work. So there's an issue to sales in terms of training salespeople to sell better. It is a profession. Selling should be a profession. The vast majority of salespeople I come across don't treat it that way. They don't read books. They don't improve their skills. They don't go on courses. They got into sales because it was the quickest way to get a decent car. That was why most people go into it. And when we talk about the selling proposition, we know lots of surveys, lots of research on it, that if you explain the proposition better, you can charge a higher price. So one of the examples we've used on many seminars is we get people to make a judgment on price. Half the audience have an envelope A, and it says, what would you pay for steak and chips? What would you pay to get your tax return done? What would you pay to get your car valeted? The other half have same 3 questions, but it says, what would you pay for a locally sourced fresh steak cooked to your order with hand cut, triple cooked, skin on fries, locally sourced seasonal vegetables, blah, blah, blah. Your tax return done, making sure you've used every tax opportunity to reduce your bills, filed on time, just elaboration of the same product. And when you ask them, what do you think that would cost? You always get something like double for the one where you elaborate. It's the classic Marks and Spencer's. It's not a chocolate pudding. It's a melt in the middle, blah,
Marks
blah,
and
blah.
Spencer's.
Absolutely. And salespeople don't do that. They want to get the sale and leave. And what they need to do is spend a bit more time elaborating all the other reasons why you should buy. Otherwise, if the only one you leave on the table to talk about is price, that is the one they talk about,
Sure.
And that's where you've suddenly got nowhere to go. If your only ammunition is a price issue, you're stuffed.
Moving on from and keeping in the same sphere as pricing and certainly cost. We're in some challenging times with inflation and interest rates off the back of COVID. We know that. Does that change any of the pricing issues?
It doesn't change any of the concepts, because they're concepts, they're fundamentals, they're logic equations. So the calculation of, if I put my prices up, I'll lose customers. If I drop it, I'll get more customers. That logic remains. The sensitivity in a challenging marketplace is slightly different to the sensitivity in an easy marketplace. We've had 10 years or more of a relatively easy marketplace to go and run a business. That is going to get more difficult. So the logic doesn't change, but the parameters will change in terms of how sensitive customers are to price. What also changes, of course, is the imperative changes. Did I need to make more money 5 years ago? No, I was making enough. It was okay. I could have my nice holidays and car, and the bank weren't on my back, etc. As you go into difficult times and profit gets squeezed and maybe turned into losses, the urgency, the importance of getting price right as one of the ways to make profits again, that becomes a much more important issue than people give it credit for. So none of the practical fundamentals or principles change. The sensitivity changes and the importance of it changes. It racks up a bit. When I'm running helium projects, and have done in the past, I've done some where the business is in distress and they go, we just need help. And when I go in there, I go, you should do this. And they go, oh, we'll do that then. They don't argue with anything because they're desperate. They need the business fixed. They need to make money.
Yep.
One example, they were told, if you don't make money by the end of the year, the bank are going to take the keys off you. Well, what do we need to do? Didn't challenge any of the things I said. You just get on with it. A business that's doing okay, that thinks it could do better, goes, I get the idea, but I'm not sure that works for us. And I can't make them because they're making enough money.
Yeah, sure.
Now that will change because there will be a sense of urgency and importance to getting that right.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. It is clear pricing is such a big issue for many businesses. What else should business owners be thinking about, especially given this current economy?
Well, interest rates, I gather, have gone up again today by 0.5%. And again, it's quite difficult because I had a mortgage once fixed at 11%. A 2.25% mortgage rate doesn't scare me at all. I have lots of clients and I have lots of people who work for me where they've been used to low interest rates for a very long time. And, a 0.5% increase in the rate is effectively, not quite, but a 50% jump in the cost of your debt. And if it goes up again, we will have some clients, we've done the exercise, some clients whose cost of debt will double or treble in the foreseeable future. Some of our team, they're on fixed rate mortgages. They will end. And when they end, their mortgages will be substantially higher. So interest rates is a real concern to us because we've had a 10-year period of easy to get, cheap to borrow. Nobody asked too many stupid questions. If you wanted to buy a buy-to-let, you had a modest deposit, you bought a buy-to-let, you're a landlord. Great. Oh, I can remortgage it, buy another one. We've got lots of people who've got property highly leveraged on cheap debt. When that cheap debt isn't cheap anymore and there's no capacity in that property to raise money or do anything else, and the rent no longer covers the interest rate, and there's a quirk of the tax rules for landlords that's a pain, that is going to make some landlords go, I can't pay the bills. I can't pay my mortgage because the dynamics have changed. So interest rates, definitely a big issue. I think debt collection will be a big issue. Whenever you get into a prickly economic period, people start holding back a bit of cash because they either haven't got it or are holding onto it for the obvious reasons. Debt collection hasn't been an issue because if you had an invoice discounting facility, you could let your customers take 60 or 90 days to pay. Didn't really cost you much money. It was a service you offered them. When that is costing you money, you don't want to do that. But when you try getting the money off those customers who've been used to having 90 days of credit, it's not an easy job. So, lots of factors are going to change. I would say, and we say this all the time, this is not a current issue. This is an always issue,
sure.
But people don't do anything with it in the good times. I would say the vast majority of businesses that we come across are a single company structure, single business structure. They have all their financial eggs in that basket. If there is a catastrophe, anything they've built up over all those years of hard work is gone. And therefore, we would always advocate you should have a two-company structure, so a holding company and a trading business. Trading business makes money, shove it up to the holding company. It buys assets, shove them up to the holding company. It owns property, have them in the holding company. We had a taxi firm client. The phone number was owned by the holding company because that's where all the value was. And people don't do that. So when there is a catastrophe, everything's gone. If you have that two-company structure, you can protect some of that wealth against a financial disaster, particularly if it's out of your control. You can't set interest rates. You can't determine what your energy costs are, and that's a big issue for people. So business structures, I think, will become more important. The problem with business structures is I can't do that today and then go bust tomorrow. They unravel it all. You've got to put it in place, trade for a period of time, at least 6 months and probably longer. So people should be thinking about, as we enter a uncertain, unknown length period of challenge, I should be getting my business in the right structure to be ready for what I don't know is coming in the future. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I remember many years ago when I went to marketing school, as it was, Institute of Direct Marketing, and I was with some huge business marketing directors from some of the big banks, actually, and they were talking about how in a downturn, marketing is something you should spend more on, not spend less on.
Yeah.
And when I got my head around that at the beginning, because most small to medium-sized businesses, of course, look at marketing first to cut.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying across all of what you've been talking about this morning, and it's absolutely fascinating, some of it is blatantly obvious, but actually, what you're saying is they're not doing it. Business owners aren't doing it. They're not thinking about it and not putting it into practice.
As my mother used to say, the problem with common sense is not as common as you think it is. Let's be honest. The vast majority of businesses I come across went into business not to run a business. Is because they were builders or engineers, or they went into business because that was how they did what they did. They've not gone to business school. They don't have MBAs. Some do, but very many don't have it. They all go to work thinking someone's going to catch me out in a minute because I'm making this up as I go along. It's no wonder they don't understand some of these issues because they only know their business. That's their field of vision. We see hundreds of businesses, so we have a much wider experience of things that need to get done and get right. People issues is a classic one. Most small businesses don't have an HR department. The boss is doing this stuff in between everything else that he's doing. And right now, that's a big issue. Recruitment for most of my clients for the last 2 or 3 years has been a massive problem. Getting people has been a huge problem. Unions are pushing for pay rises and stuff. I think that's going to change in the next year or two. But actually managing your people, that's the core of most businesses. So effective management, leadership, support, etc. We have many clients where that's done in a separate company because it's also where your biggest risk is. If you have a unfair dismissal claim or a racial sexual discrimination claim, some of which there's no ceiling to the limit, that's a big risk. Separate it.
Can I deep dive on that? Because that's a really interesting point. So what you're saying is having a separate organisation to house team members is actually a very good thing to do for the business, but also the team member. Because what you're doing is ultimately really protecting their roles, their jobs. Because in the past, if it's all in one place, just like the property, just like the assets, if it's in one place, it's all at risk. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, essentially. Is it beneficial for the employees? It doesn't make a lot of difference where they're employed. The risk of their job being there or not there is the same. It's an economic reality. For the business, having the employment risk, and that is one of the biggest risks our clients carry, is people come to work and do silly things. They trip over a cable and they have a claim. They go off sick for months on end and you're still paying their wages. It's a complex area. When things are difficult and people get short-tempered and say silly things, the chances of a claim against you go up enormously. And over the years, for thousands of clients, a whole host of things that people have, as employees, put pressure on. The separate company gives the business protection because that company will cross-charge its time to the main business. So there's no tax dodge or anything else. It's a legitimate. We're putting people in a particular structure, charging the use of their time to the business. But that business makes no money or a very small amount of money. And every time it makes money, it shoves it up to the holding company where it's nice and safe.
Which is what you said earlier.
Absolutely. If you then get a claim against that company, you can say there's no money to pay it.
Sure.
I haven't got any money to pay it. I've had a couple of construction clients that have been doing this for a long time, and he said probably every 3 to 6 months somebody would come in, I fell over on the site, a lawyer tells me I've got a claim because you didn't put a sign up, and whatever it is, there's plenty of lawyers, no win, no fee lawyers out there. And his response now is, okay, here's a set of the accounts for the business that employs you, send that to your lawyer and we'll see what happens. And 9 times out of 10, the lawyer says, I'm not taking this case on, because even if I win, I don't get any money, So there is a safety issue for the business of putting people in a structure that's controllable. There is a side issue, which it actually makes it easier for you to manage. You treat them as an employment resource, and you manage them better, and you worry about their mental well-being and their support and their financial education and things. You treat it differently than when they're just on the payroll. But that's a sort of softer issue around the edges. The main thing from my point of view is, as you move forward into a difficult economic period, that is one of the business risks you carry. You can put in a nice, neat package and manage it in there.
Can you give me some examples of that, Peter?
Yeah. So if we look at the emotional issue of pricing, how people make the wrong decisions because they let personal feelings get in the way. We did a project some years ago for a business which has now evolved. It didn't close. It was a tourist attraction called Dobwell's Family Adventure Park, steam railways in this locality. They now have lodges and cabins and stuff there. But at the time, it was a tourist attraction. People turned up. They had a look on the site. They bought food. They went on the trains, did what you do. They were struggling financially. So we said, got no choice. You've got to put £1 a person on the gate price. You just got to do it. Nothing you can do about it. Worked brilliantly, made a lot of money. And at the end of the season, the business owner came back to me and he said, we've got to put the prices back. We've got to drop the prices back down again. And I went, why? I thought it worked really well. I don't understand it. And he said, but I've had so many complaints. Really? I had no idea. Now, I wouldn't have any idea because I'm not there every day.
No, sure.
He's the guy they complain to. So I said, how many complaints have you had? And, oh, crikey, 40, I reckon, 40 complaints. I went, okay. Now, 40 complaints might be 40 families. I get that. How many visitors have you had in the last year? 100,000. So he wanted to drop the price to 99,900 odd customers in order to avoid 40 people complaining.
Wow.
Now, he wanted to do that because it was him they complained to. That was the emotional problem for him. But he didn't think about the mathematics of that, which is you've just given away £100,000, give or take, to keep 40 customers happy. And in reality, there's always complaining customers. Probably 20 of those would have complained if it was free. That's the nature of a large number of customers. But when we go through the financial dynamics and you say, okay, next time you get a complaint, send them to Mallorca on holiday by way of compensation, you'll still be better off. But that's a really good example, an extreme example, but a really good example how that people make flawed decisions to avoid the pain of price arguments, conflicts, etc. And that's one of the things that we come across time and time again is the person at the sharp end is making a decision not based on finance, not based on profit, not based on good economics, based on they have to deal with the problem when it comes into the front of them. Does that make sense?
Ultimately emotion.
Yeah. And I think another really good example, which was actually on a business for somebody we were talking to just now, they had a, give or take, a £10 million business, and on average they were giving away something like 20% discounts across the board. In effect, therefore, they had a £12.5 million business and they gave away £2.5 million in discounts. Now, they didn't know that until I did those numbers. They're like most people's sets of accounts, their starting point is sales invoices raised.
Yep.
Not sales I'd like to have got, and I had to give away 2.5 million to get there, but sales invoices raised. So we started to talk about, that's a £2.5 million problem. That's the second biggest cost in your business. Stuff they bought to sell was their biggest cost, bigger than payroll, bigger than property cost, bigger than every other cost in their business. Who's in charge of that cost? No one. They didn't write it down. They didn't know that number. No one's in charge of it. Okay, you give a discount to a customer. What are the rules for giving a discount? There aren't any. What circumstances is a customer allowed to have a discount? Any. So the customer hasn't paid for 3 months, still gets a discount. All those things, because no one knew that number, managed that number, and controlled that number. Now, I wasn't suggesting then, I wouldn't suggest it now. You could get that to zero. But if it's a £2.5 million cost and you control it better, it could be £500,000 of extra profit on the bottom line, and it was in that particular case. And the way I got that across, and this is one of the techniques we use, is take all the mathematic logic out of there, because a lot of the people I talk to don't understand the math. Put it in a very simple, practical format. So what I said was, it's a £2.5 million problem. That's give or take 50 grand a week. We're not going to give discounts anymore. You can't give discounts by pressing the button on the machine. You have to give a cash rebate. That's policy from now on. We didn't do this. This was just my way of explaining the issue. You've got to give a cash rebate if somebody says I want a discount. So the invoice is £100. You can't give them an £80 an invoice. You've got to give them a £100 invoice, and then you've got to go upstairs, because we'll have a room upstairs with the money in it, and you get a £20 note and you give it back to them and say, that's just the way we work it. No VAT dodge, nothing else. It's just cash rebates instead of discounts off the invoice value. Okay, sounds a bit cack-handed, but okay, we'll go with that. So, right, okay. So we now have a room upstairs with 50 grand a week in it. Should we have bars on the window for that room? Should we have a guy outside? Do you think it's reasonable when somebody goes in there to say, why are you taking that money? Who are you giving it to? Why are you giving it to them? Is he up to date on his bills? You simply control real money much better than pressing a button on a machine. And that's one of the things that we see in lots of businesses is it's numbers on a page, and it doesn't have the impact when you turn it into real cash. You are giving away £2.5 million in readies to your customers. You would behave differently if you did that. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
And it's really making sure people understand it's a financial issue. It's about understanding it's real. It's real money. It's not pressing a button on a machine. It's real money straight off the bottom line. And that affects job security. That affects all sorts of things. Does that make sense?
You're not an accountant. By a long way, you're not an accountant.
I don't tell people.
No, but you're much more. Everything you've been talking about today is all about businesses.
It is.
And it's actually, on a clock face, it's all the numbers. You're going around everything, all the departments, all of the understanding. And I can completely understand how you say when you talk to other businesses that come to ask you for help, you're saying, look, we can talk to you about all the facets of a business.
Yeah.
For our listeners and viewers today, I know they'll be scratching down all the notes that you've made. Fantastic that you've come in today. Is there anything else, Peter, that you would like to
It's been my pleasure. And you're quite right. When I'm on holiday, I do not tell people I'm an accountant, because that is the kiss of death to every conversation. And it is about process and structure and systems. I find it very easy because I do a lot of it and I've been trained on it and I have some natural flair towards it, but it's process, it's system. Anyone can do this. They just need some guidance and some structure to how they do that. So if anyone's listening or watching and goes, oh, that sounds really complicated, it really isn't. It just needs someone to guide you, and it needs structure and process, and take all the emotion out of that. Feels like the right answer. Yeah, but it may not be the right answer. Facts, details. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
Good.
An absolute masterclass from Peter Hill. And thank you so much for coming in today.
It's been my pleasure.
Another British Business Podcast success. Until next time.